Hi TJs, I'm here with the lovely Trish. Trish, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Hey, Joe. My name is Trish Uhl. I am the CEO and founder of a consulting firm based out of Chicago in the US called Owl's Ledge. And we actually work with organizations and with people around emerging technologies and data analytics applied to the learning function. So that's who I am and a bit about what it is that I do.
Thank you. And you've just scared half the viewers of this video already, although they should stay, they should definitely stay,
They should.
because we are talking about those technologies and how important they are.
Yeah.
And the topic we have today is about technologies kind of converging and coming together. Specifically, let's start with AI and blockchain, because your opinion is for L&D to adopt them, it's not optional, it's imperative. So before we get to why it's imperative, what is blockchain? I think most people have got a slight handle on AI, but I think most people I talk to have got no idea about blockchain. And I'll kind of be honest, I'm not 100% sure myself. So please
No,
educate me.
that's okay. But actually, if I may, can we start with AI? Because I want to throw a little bit of a different perspective on it, and then we can talk about how blockchain is coming in and
Loving
sort
to
of
start.
getting added to artificial intelligence. So artificial intelligence, if we think about how it is that we're already experiencing artificial intelligence in our consumer lives, we can think about how artificial intelligence is coming in with the five human senses. So, as an example, artificial intelligence is developing sight. It's been developing tactile function. It's been able to touch and have kinesthetic. It can touch things. It's developed hearing. We can see elements of that. And it's actually starting to move into more taste and smell as well. So if we think about, so where do we see artificial intelligence? So, Joe, let me ask you, where do we see artificial intelligence where it can hear and speak? Like, what would be an example of AI that can do that?
Some kind of robotic stuff. I don't know if that's too out there in sci-fi.
No, but I mean, so what's on your phone?
Oh, there you go. You see, this is why I need you in my life, Trish. Yes, we have various devices from Amazon around the house, or Google, and other providers do exist.
Exactly. So I mean, we can invoke, like, I just realized that I've got Lexi sitting next to me, so I shan't say the word. But exactly. Shh, 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 right? Because I forgot to hit the little mute button on her. But the whole thing is that we can see artificial intelligence adopting the five senses. So we have devices that can hear and can speak. So all right, so what about devices that can see? Where do we see computer vision and image recognition coming into play? Do you have an idea? Where do you see that in your consumer life?
Yeah, so we've had a big thing in the UK, kind of in the middle of 2019, where at train stations they were using video recognition of people's faces. There was a lot of discussion around the human rights kind of interests in that.
Exactly. And then we're also seeing it show up on our phones as well. So if we take a look at an Android phone or take a look at our Apple phones, it's been now a couple of years where our photos started automagically, like, organizing themselves into albums by the content of the photo,
I
like the
love the way
people
you
that we're
said
with.
auto magically. I picked up on that.
Automagically.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
also photo recognition for unlocking your phone as well. I don't know if that comes under the same heading.
Exactly. And then I don't know, do you in the UK, have you experienced an Amazon Go store yet where there's no cashier?
I think we've heard of them. I'm not sure we're quite as advanced that yet as that yet.
Okay. So that all works on computer vision. It all works on image recognition. So basically, when you walk into an Amazon Go store, because we've got them all over the United States now, and as a matter of fact, no disrespect to Amazon, but there's a competitor of Amazon that's brought similar technology to Tokyo, and they've got the license to be able to have cashierless retail throughout Tokyo, 3,000 stores in time for the Olympics.
Wow. But then
So,
this brings us into that subject of people worrying about losing their jobs, isn't it?
well, and exactly. And so then, and that's the way that we need to look at how is the technology coming in, and what exactly is it deconstructing? Because the loss of a job is more within our control than we may think. if we stay ahead of it, right? So if I look at a computer device and I go, wait a minute, this thing can hear me and it can talk back. It can see me and recognize me, right? We've got some robotics now where we think about, actual physical robots that can actually touch. And then, so the more that we see artificial intelligence being really good at the human five senses, and we're starting to see it where it's individual, right? So the device, like our smart speakers that can speak and can hear, they don't see, right? So they don't have a combination of the senses yet, but they will. And so as more and more of these things come into our environments, then we should expect them to continue to come into our businesses and come into operations. And as they do that, that means it's going to impact learning on a number of different ways. So if I know that a computer can see, as example, and recognize the content of something, and it can read, then what are things that I do in my daily tasks that require sight and require me to be able to read? And then I should be able to prepare to disrupt myself, because I should expect at this point that a machine's going to wind up automating that. Does that make some sense?
Yeah, I think it does. And I think this is the challenge that we have as maybe as leaders and educators, we can do that. And then maybe it's a separate conversation about what if I'm the waitress, the person who's serving you in the supermarket, how can I get ahead of that? But there are, I think, two different kind of roles to look at.
Absolutely. And then this is where it gets into where, and of course, this is a whole other separate conversation, and I realize that, but this gets into, I used to waitress actually when I was in university. And the whole thing about waitressing, like people appreciated somebody remembering their name or remembering their order or having, you have your routine people that come in, your loyal customers that come for coffee on your shift and doing those types of things. And it's that relationship. It's no longer a transaction. They're coming in order to have that experience, that shared experience with you. And that's where human competitive advantage is, right? So that's across the board, is how do we look at how we provide value there? Because the next thing that comes in are technologies like blockchain. And what's happening with technologies like artificial intelligence and blockchain and Internet of Things and 5G is that in many cases, these emerging technologies are coming into our organizations and into our consumer lives. They're coming in individually, and then they're converging together. So what that means is, just like we used to not have smartphones, right? We used to just have phones, and then we had internet, and those were two separate things. And now we've got smartphone and internet, like the technologies have converged, and not only converged, but they've dematerialized, they've disappeared into the one device. So I no longer carry a separate, iPod in order to listen to music. It's on my phone. I no longer carry a separate camera. It's dematerialized into my phone. Well, the same thing is now happening with these technologies coming into operations within our organizations. And so the benefit that blockchain adds is blockchain is what's called a digital ledger. So if we think about it for a moment, where do we use ledgers to record debit and credit transactions in other parts of our lives? Like where do we use a ledger to do that?
So we would do that for our own personal banking accounts. We would do that in business to make sure we know what transactions are going on and who's paid what invoice, that kind of thing.
Exactly. And so like right now, Joe, like if you and I were going to work on something together and there was going to be some kind of an exchange of service or an exchange of goods, would I just take cash and put it in an envelope and send it to you?
Yeah, if you could, and just write my name on it.
Exactly. Just right, and just put in big letters, bounty, loot, right? Gold bullion, right?
Yeah,
Right.
that's
Well,
that's how I do all my business. Is that not the modern way?
that's how you do all your business? No, I totally get it, because you only work with people that you trust, right? Exactly. But why is it?
We've got tracking and invoices and banking. We have to have records of everything.
We have records of everything, and why?
So we can move stuff, it gets to the right place, and it makes sure it doesn't go into somebody else's bank account. I've got the right amount of stuff. I can confirm whether you've paid or not.
Excellent. And then it's not just between us, then it's between us and a series of third parties, right? So if I even wanted to send you money electronically right now, it would go from my bank to your bank, and then the banks would actually reconcile that transaction. You trust your bank, I trust my bank, and then we could also keep our own accounts, our own ledgers, and make sure that our banks have it straight, right, individually. So that's an awful lot of people in the middle of an exchange of money. So what if that exchange and that third party just went away? So what if you and I could have the same trust in the transactions going back and forth without having to have those intermediaries in the middle of it?
Okay, so that
That's
would
what,
be a lot of smooth operation. It would reduce a lot of friction and time, I'm assuming. But
a
then the
lot of
big question is, how can that work?
Yeah. So there's the actual technology called blockchain, and then there's the application of blockchain. Like what can you do with blockchain? So a lot of people have first heard about blockchain because of the cryptocurrencies, because of a cryptocurrency like Bitcoin in particular. But blockchain is the underlying technology that runs Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, but currency, money, isn't the only thing of value that we can actually record transactions of on blockchain. So we've got financial applications of blockchain like the cryptocurrencies, and we've got non-financial applications of blockchain like knowledge and information.
Okay, I kind of see where you're heading with this.
Do you see where I'm going with this?
Yeah.
So blockchain does exactly that. It removes the friction, it removes the third party intermediaries. And there's a word that we've been hearing a lot over the past few years, ever since we started talking about VUCA, and that's disintermediation, which means pulling the middleman out. So if you think about it, we have brokers, right? There's always a third party in like every human transaction where there's an exchange of value. For example, property, like physical property. If I were going to sell my home, then we would work with the title company that's kept a recording or a history of all of the different transactions that have to do with the house. So they would go away. If we talk about supply chain and all of the paperwork and all of the interactions, all of the different touch points from, let's say in food manufacturing, from the farm to fork life cycle. So from the farmer producing the goods and then that going to the broker and going to the supplier and getting on a truck and going to a factory, like all of those different interactions require paperwork and an exchange, right? That this person has picked up this good and has transferred it somewhere else, and that there's been money that's exchanged. All of that then would get taken over by blockchain. But the same thing is true with knowledge.
So let me pause you there because
Yeah,
that all makes a certain amount of technical sense.
yeah.
But there's still the kind of, but blockchain must have the rules set up. So unless it's literally a piece of AI learning as it goes along, which is a whole other set of conversations and questions I have, somebody has to program it or give it the parameters to say, well, when you're the farmer, you record this bit of data here. And when you're the broker, you record this bit of data here. So there's still an intermediary is what I'm thinking, but you might educate me otherwise.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So blockchain, the actual technology, was started after the global financial crisis, and it was started actually by what we believe are actually a group of people rather than necessarily an individual. There's definitely mystery around the origins of some of the initial technology itself. Yeah, it's really kind of fascinating. But it was a way of people coming together and going, enough is enough. We don't want to be vulnerable to the banks messing around with our financial futures anymore. We want to be in control of what happens with our money. And so then that's where the origins of the program started. It's also now gone into people who don't own their identities, right? We've got like 2 billion people in the world who don't have any papers to identify themselves if they were to leave their mother country. So blockchain came up as a grassroots technology in order to be able to address those types of problems, to be able to democratize and give people control of things that are of value, so that we can take them wherever we go. So all of that to be said, the underlying technology that handles the transactions has a security protocol that's embedded into it, and it has something that's called oracles that actually verify the transactions. So trusted oracles are set up, to your point, an oracle is set up to be the trusted authority that this thing has happened. And then you've got, what happens is when that transaction gets recorded, it becomes another block in the chain, right? It becomes another, and then it is immutable, meaning it can't be tampered with. It exists forever. So we would have to trust that the oracle is a trusted authority to declare that something has transpired, and that we would have to trust all along the chain that the chain is good. But what's really fascinating about it is it gives everybody who's got a point on the chain, in the blockchain, transparency to all of the blocks before them to a certain degree, and all of the blocks after them. So that farmer theoretically would be able to trace exactly where all of that, where his or her product actually went to into the finished goods. And we as consumers can actually trace back finished goods all the way back to the farm.
Yeah. And if we look at any kind of industry, let alone the food industry, that becomes imperative in terms of disease, in terms of carbon footprint. I can see all sorts of applications for this. So we're looking at this from a really kind of 50,000 foot view. And I feel like I'm getting a masterclass on it, which is awesome. Thank you. What about from an L&D perspective? I don't want to separate L&D from the world and from business and from organizations, but I do want to focus on this a bit more about how is this going to affect the learning and the development and the org dev part of our roles.
Okay, so one last quick example in the physical world, because if we can wrap our heads around how it works in the physical world, then we can understand it in the more abstract world of knowledge and learning, right? So here in the United States, we have a brand of tuna fish called Bumblebee Tuna. And as a matter of fact, those who have access to Bumblebee Tuna at a grocery store, you can pick up a can of Bumblebee Tuna and take a look. There's a code on it, and go out to Bumblebee's website, put in that code on the website, and it's using blockchain to tell you exactly what part of the sea and what vessel those fish in that can came from.
That's pretty amazing. Pretty cool.
That's pretty amazing. So now if we take that into our lives as people working in organizations, what are things that we don't usually have control over that we can't take with us when we leave an employer?
Well, usually that's around things like training we've had, other than I've got a certificate to say I've been on a one-day negotiation skills course. But it's actually more about the performance, about the things that we've done and that we've achieved, and being able to prove that to a new employer. I'm wondering if that's an area that's going to be of interest.
That is exactly an area of interest. And so it winds up making all of that portable. So regardless of, so instead of the organization, the former employer having access to all of those records, we now get to take all of those records with us and be able to provide verified qualifications and development opportunities moving forward. And it's true not only of the things from the workplace, but our academic transcripts as well.
Yeah, but is this not a glorified certificate or badge?
It's a good question, but what happens, so if you wanted to get your academic transcripts right now, what would you have to do?
I don't even know. Contact the university probably and phone them up and say, can I have something to prove that I've got my degree? And they send me a bit of paper, is what I'm guessing.
And then what if you had a professional certification, a professional qualification as well? And what if you needed to put a collection of those together to provide to a new potential employer? How many different entities would you have to speak with in order to get your records, your collective records together?
Exactly. Or I've got those certificates and I have to photocopy them. This is sounding so 1990s as I'm talking.
Right? And exactly. And then we're also beholden to the time frame for the other entities that we're contacting, right? So if I contact the registrar's office at the university, it's going to be on their timetable to get me that information. If I go back to ATD in order to get a copy of my CPLP certification, the certificate, it's going to be on their timetable for them to send that verification back.
So from
as a matter of
view, it's checking of it as well from the employer's point of view, to phone up a university and say, did Joe Cook really get this degree? As opposed to whatever the blockchain example is, where it's proof and they can just go, yeah, we trust that.
Exactly. Absolutely. So it removes the friction, right? So then it's acceleration, it's ease of use, and then there's also less cost as well. Because I think the last time I wound up getting my academic transcripts, I think it was like $200. You know what I mean? So now think about if we have to go to multiple entities, or if somebody, you know, especially if somebody went to multiple schools in order to be able to bring all of that together, it could be problematic.
Understood.
So, sorry.
I understood, yeah.
Yeah. So that's where it's first coming into L&D, is it's coming in on the qualifications. But now, what about other things? What other learning assets and training assets and knowledge assets could we exchange on enterprise blockchain?
So would this be around, maybe I've created, it could be a course, it could be a PDF, it could be, I don't know, something smaller than that, it could be a podcast. I mean, I'm thinking resources here, but could it be something like that where other people can curate from it? Or am I kind of just thinking far too third dimensionally of the internet?
No, you're exactly right. As a matter of fact, they're talking about blockchain being the next iteration of the internet, that it becomes the security protocol and the trusted ledger behind the internet.
So would this potentially reduce the fake news element of some things?
Yeah, because then and again, it would depend on the oracles that are in play, but the blockchain that you would subscribe to for particular news media, let's say, would actually then be part of, if you trust those sources, then theoretically those would come from trusted sources. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. It's a bit like I trust the BBC News, but not Fox News. That kind of thing.
Right. And they wouldn't get twisted, right? They wouldn't get convoluted. But that's a whole interesting thing. Because
I went off on my own tangent now. I'm sorry.
No. That's okay. But it becomes a marketplace, right? I mean, it becomes an exchange of a marketplace. And if we look at the future of learning at work, it's really following more of what the information technology people would call a micro strategy, which basically means we wind up having like a marketplace that's created in a platform that pulls all of this content together in a way that allows people to sort of shop for themselves, and can also be driven. Now, this is where the AI comes in. Artificial intelligence can run on top of blockchain in the form of algorithms in order to anticipate who needs what. So instead of you necessarily having to figure out, well, I want to be able to do this, and I'm going to kind of, sort through and curate my own stuff to try and figure out what I need, the AI would be able to run and basically go, okay, Joe, you've thrown off some kind of signals within the blockchain environment that tell me, the algorithm or this ensemble of algorithms, that you're trying to advance or develop yourself in this particular direction. Here are the things that would be of benefit to you in order to be able to get that done. And that's where we're heading now, is anticipatory content.
Yeah. And I can see how this would save time for individuals, but also for corporations. So outside of work, I'm getting into artwork and painting and drawing, and I'm pretty bad at most of it, but I'm loving it and enjoying it. But it takes a lot of time for me to look on Facebook groups, websites, YouTube, to find the right video for the skill that I need to develop at that time. Whereas what you're describing, it's almost like having a friend sitting next to me going, you're rubbish at that technique, let me show you how. And that would accelerate my skill or lack thereof quite a lot. So where, in wrapping this up, where could someone who doesn't know a lot about this, but is suddenly like me going, oh, this sounds interesting, and I can see how it might affect my team, my organization, my company in the future, what are some of the things we could just start looking at to develop our awareness and understanding?
So yeah, it's a really good question. So there was actually a case study by a bank in South America that was done at the ATD conference earlier this year about how they created a blockchain marketplace for their people to be able to go in and basically shop for the learning assets that they need. If people would like on this call information about that particular case study, I'm happy to send people a link. That would probably be the easiest to be able to get that information right now. But there's a number of different, I would take a look at just even getting an understanding of the blockchain technology itself. IBM's got some great videos out there on kind of really breaking it down into layman terms as far as how it works. And then I would also, with the artificial intelligence, I'd take a look at like Bernard Marr is one of the people that I would take a look at. And then also another source would be MIT has been producing a lot of content around artificial intelligence. And again, if we pay attention within our organizations of how these technologies are coming into operations first, then go talk to people in your organization that are already beginning to adopt these technologies, because they're going to wind up actually bringing L&D into that core functionality. So we want to get ahead of it and have an understanding of the implications of how it is that it's being utilized in operations, and then how we might join earlier rather than later.
That sounds, as you say, not optional, but imperative to me. Thank you so much, Trish. I've learned absolutely tons from you. Where can we find you, your website, social media, if we'd like to ask for that case study, and also find out more about the work that you do?
Fabulous. Thanks, Joe. So Twitter is one of the best places. So I'm at Trish Uhl, so at TRISHUHL. And then Trish Uhl also on LinkedIn. And then there's also owlsledge.com. It's got a little hyphen in the middle there. But any of those properties will get you to me, and I'm happy to share resources.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks for your time. Yay, cake.